They call it CoffeeScript combined. Take a sip, I know it's quite a trip, 'cause somehow you can write less code but get more done. Yeah! Come on and take a seat, don't end up obsolete. They call it CoffeeScript. Yeah.
Hey look, you made it all the way to level 6. In level 6 we're going to be talking about object orientation. You know, stuff with classes and how to apply that and all the cool new mechanisms that CoffeeScript gives you to do object orientation. So let's dive into it. Remember this object, right? We played around with this a little bit. We have our coffee object. Well, what would happen if we wanted to, instead of having it as an object, create it as a class? Let's give that a try. So here we have our coffee class. It has a constructor. That constructor is called when it's instantiated. We can't call it explicitly. I'll show you how to instantiate it in a minute. And then we have these parameters we sent in, which we're going to set as properties on the class. Some people might think of these as instance variables because they're properties of the instance of that class. Another way we can write this constructor is simply by using this one line you see here. So the parameters with the @ symbol basically does the same thing. It's just a shortcut. If we want to have functions inside of our class, well, it looks pretty much the same as they did when we had them inside of our object. Pretty much the same thing. Now, if we want to instantiate this coffee object, we're going to call it French coffee with the strength of 2. We do something like this. Then if we call French.brew, it's going to pop up an alert that looks like this. But how do we do inheritance in CoffeeScript? What if we have a coffee class like this and we want to have sort of a category, a type of coffee that's under a certain category? We might, for instance, have class Max Goodhouse extends coffee. And if we just instantiated Max Goodhouse, it would work just like the coffee class. We can also override the constructor if we want to. So in this case, the default strength is going to be 0. And we can also add properties at this point. So we can have brand equals Max Goodhouse. At this point, we can instantiate that class. And if we run boring.brew, we're going to get back brewing boring. We can also override functions in our parent class just by declaring them like so. So in this case, if I instantiate this object and call brew, it's going to print brewing Max Goodhouse boring. Another thing that we can do when we're overriding functions, if we want to call the function from the parent class, we can use the keyword super. So in this case, we're calling super amount, but it sucks. And then when we call that pour function, it's going to print out pouring a single cup, but it sucks. We're going to want to use this coffee class from inside of our jQuery. So let's put some jQuery in here with the pour click function. So we're going to watch for a click event. If inventory isn't 0, take away 1, and then alert that we poured a cup of coffee. But this isn't going to work. Why? Well, it's because of this. So we have that @ symbol in there. So it's going to be calling this dot from inside a different context. So basically it's going to error out because it's going to be looking for the property of the DOM element called inventory and name, which isn't good. We want this to refer to our class. To fix this, we need to use something called the fat arrow. What the fat arrow is going to do is bind to the current value of this. So no matter what context this code is run, it's always going to be referring to the coffee class. We're going to go through one more jQuery error captain's log example before we're all done. In jQuery error captain's log, we used an object to encapsulate some code and keep it organized. Let's take a look at the code. So here we have select flights. We have a property inside of there and a init function. We're going to bind a click event. We're going to bind another click event, this time calling it in a different way. Show the flights. At the bottom, we have 2 extra functions. I'm not going to bother showing you what those definitions are. Let's try converting this into a CoffeeScript class. So up at the top, we're going to have a select flights class. That select flights class is going to have a constructor for the fetching flights property. Next, we have the bind function. That's pretty simple. We just need to get rid of the parentheses and the curly brackets. Now we have another click event, we're just calling it differently. And here, we're just pretty much going to get rid of the curly braces, the parentheses, and use the at instead of the this. Also notice that we're using the fat arrow here instead of the skinny arrow. So we can bind that at symbol, or the this, to the correct context inside of our Select Flights class. Lastly, we have our two functions, Show Flights and Change Tab. Notice that it's only the second one that we have the fat arrow on. Once we've declared the class, we need to instantiate it so that it binds to the proper events. Well, you made it to the end of the final video in A Sip of Coffee script. From here, just got to do the last couple challenges to unlock a badge, some prizes, and the final video.